After his family is imprisoned in the quantum realm by the Conqueror, the Ant-Man will need the help of an army of insects to put an end to Kang's tyranny and bring his relatives home safely. Today we're going to recap the story of the movie, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, from 2023. After helping the Avengers defeat Thanos, Scott Lang wrote a book about his life as a superhero, which made him and his family celebrities in San Francisco. At an event to promote the book, Scott is reading his biography to children in the library when he receives a call from the jail warning him about his daughter Cassie, who was arrested after shrinking a car with the PIM particles. After freeing her, Ant-Man takes the girl home where he discovers that his wife and father-in-law are helping Cassie study the quantum realm. Excited to show off her discoveries, the girl activates a microscope capable of seeing the quantum realm and begins to explain how it works, but when she hears that the device is emitting a signal to another dimension, Janet completely loses control and destroys her granddaughter's invention. Suddenly, a blue particle comes out of the telescope and explodes the laboratory, throwing everyone against the wall and opening a kind of black hole that sucks everyone into the center, making them shrink until they enter the quantum realm along with the ants. As they approach the ground, Wasp grabs her parents and Scott activates the suit to save Cassie, increasing in size and using his own body to cushion his fall. After the impact, Ant-Man returns to his normal size and, together with his daughter, starts looking for the rest of the group. But as they walk through the place, Cassie notices a sphere in the sky that begins to move towards them, forcing Scott to increase his size to throw the tentacled star away. As they watch the sphere falling, the two see a giant single-celled organism coming towards them and try to escape, but just as they are about to be captured, they end up being saved by some inhabitants of the quantum realm who take them as prisoners. Somewhere else in the quantum realm, Hope wakes up and starts looking for her parents when an approaching aircraft scans everything around them, forcing Janet to hide her daughter and husband behind trees to keep them safe. After the danger has passed, Hope starts asking her mother questions and she says she'll explain everything after they meet up with Scott and Cassie. While searching for the two, they come across a group of desert walkers who set upon the trio. Although her daughter and husband are frightened, Janet remains calm and says that she will take care of everything, advancing on the alien leader and cutting off his arm with a single movement, ending with a blow to the creature's chest. In defeat, the creature laughs and hugs Janet as if they were old friends, offering to give her and her family a lift home. Far away, Scott is taken to a ceremony of the quantum people where they pour a red liquid into his mouth, which allows humans to understand what other species are saying. Now that he can understand them, a telepath called Quaz approaches them to talk and Jentorra interrupts, saying that they can't run away because they're already being hunted by Kang, a conqueror who destroys everything he touches. Wondering if they know anything about the villain, Quaz reads their minds and tells them that they've never heard of the name, which makes Jentorra judge them as useless and order his men to take them back to where they found it. Desperate, Scott runs after her and says that he just wants to go home, but Jentorra replies that that's what everyone wants, but that it's impossible now, because the Conqueror has destroyed everything they owned to build his empire. The woman then reveals that they gathered everyone who could fight and have been trying to put an end to Kang's tyranny ever since, but have so far been unsuccessful. Thinking that this is the work of an Avenger, Cassie says that they can help and does everything she can to convince her father to join the fight, but Scott refuses and says that they must find Janet to take them back home. As soon as he hears her name, Jentorra asks where she is and says that the woman shouldn't have come back, which leaves both father and daughter very confused. Far away, the other group flies in a glider until they reach a city full of Kang's soldiers, forcing them to camouflage themselves among the quantum people until they reach an alien bar. There, Janet talks to a kind of humanoid fish and asks to speak to Krylar, an old friend who sits down at the table and starts accusing her of being responsible for the countless eliminations that Kang has caused. Thinking he wants to arrest her, Janet asks them to let her family go in peace and Krylar replies that this won't be possible, as Kang already knows they're in the kingdom and has sent hunters after Scott and Cassie. Just then, some ships approach and soldiers of the Conqueror begin to surround the group around the table, making Janet realize that Krylar is now working for Kang and has handed them over to the villain. Refusing to allow her parents to be taken away, Hope shrinks back and starts knocking out one soldier after another while Henry and Janet shoot at all sides. In the middle of the confusion, Henry realizes that Krylar is trying to escape and throws PIM particles at a kind of mutant octopus on the table, causing the quantum mollusk to increase in size and attack the traitorous old man. Taking advantage of the distraction, the group rushes to one of the ships where Janet makes a hot wire and asks her husband to take command, forcing him to stick his arms into a gooey slime that serves to pilot the ship away from there. While Henry's group flees, Scott and Cassie are found by Kang's soldiers who attack Jentorra and her men. Obeying her father's orders, Cassie stays hidden watching the battle, but when Jentorra is captured by one of the soldiers, the girl refuses to stand by and uses her costume to help her. As she's still a beginner, the girl forgets to press the grow button and ends up hitting one of the soldiers' helmets while she's the size of an ant, forcing Scott to join the fight to save his daughter. After freeing herself, Gentora runs to Quaz, who reads the enemy's minds and realizes that reinforcements are arriving, but before they can reach the ships to escape, more men arrive on the battlefield and destroy everything they find along the way. In the middle of the dust cloud, an extremely big-headed creature appears in front of Ant-Man and starts talking to him as if they were old acquaintances, revealing himself to be Darren Cross, an old Ant-Man villain. After his defeat a few years ago, Darren fell into the quantum realm and is now working for Kang, helping him set up his tyranny and acquiring this extremely bizarre egghead. In the service of the Conqueror, Darren now calls himself MODOK and says that there is no way Scott can escape, deciding to take everyone as prisoners to Kang's citadel. While her granddaughter and son-in-law are in the dungeon, Janet finally decides to tell what happened during the 30 years she was trapped in the quantum realm and reveals that she met a scientist who had an accident and lost the route he was following. After helping him up, the woman carried Kang to her ship, which was supposedly capable of traveling through the multiverse, allowing her to take them back to Earth. Thinking that this was the perfect opportunity to return home, Janet used all her knowledge to help him recharge the ship's energy core, but nothing seemed to work. After several years of trying, they finally managed to adjust the matrix and reactivate the ship, but as it was connected to Kang's neural network, Janet was able to see everything the man did the moment he touched the core, discovering that he had destroyed all the worlds he had passed through, exterminating races and destroying entire timelines. After seeing all of Kang's crimes, Janet realizes that he was exiled to the quantum realm and his ship was sabotaged so that he would remain there for eternity, but thanks to her help, he could now go back to spreading chaos throughout the multiverse. Afraid of what he might do, Janet gave up her dream of returning to Earth and shrunk herself to steal the energy core of the spaceship, but as Kang was too powerful to be defeated, she decided to make the Matrix grow with the PIM particles, causing an explosion of probabilities and leaving the two of them with no way of leaving the quantum realm on their own. Even without the ship, Kang managed to recover most of his powers and used each of them to conquer the quantum realm, imposing his will against the populations that already existed there. While the war between Kang and the quantum people was going on, Hope managed to bring Janet back to Earth in the past and Kang lost hope of recovering the core, but now that she has returned, the Conqueror will do anything to gain access to the PIM particles and return the energy matrix to its original size. Now that Ant-Man is his prisoner, Kang goes to talk to him and reveals that he has eliminated many Avengers in other realities, including Thor himself. Wanting to recover the core, the Conqueror tells Scott that Janet has stolen something from him and asks for his help to get it back, saying that if he helps, he can get everyone out of there. But even though he wants to go home, the Avenger refuses to cooperate, forcing Kang to use force and say that he will eliminate Cassie in front of him if Ant-Man refuses to cooperate. With his daughter about to be eliminated before his eyes, Scott sees no other choice and decides to give in to the Conqueror's request, accompanying the villains to the place where the core exploded. As soon as he arrives on the scene, MODOK tells him that Lang must shrink and enter the storm to find the core and make it return to its original size, but he must do it quickly, because his mind will start to collapse as soon as he enters the field of probabilities. After saying goodbye to Cassie, Scott jumps into the abyss and begins to shrink more and more as he falls. When he reaches a subatomic level, the Ant-Man finally gets through the storm and arrives at the place where the nucleus is, but at this point reality is so distorted that he begins to replicate himself infinitely, entering into a dispute with his clones to see who can reach the Matrix first. Unaware that Scott is down there, Henry flies over the core when the Wasp hears her husband's screams coming from the storm, deciding to dive into the probabilities to save him. As she falls, the woman begins to replicate herself and Janet explains that these are just possibilities and that the right thing to do is to ignore them. After her mother's advice, Hope continues diving in search of her husband, who ends up being buried by his own copies. About to lose his life, Scott hears Cassie calling for him and, motivated by his daughter's voice, manages to gather his last strength to climb his clones until he approaches the Matrix. Faced with the core, Ant-Man fires a PIM particle grenade to make the object return to its original size, but for some reason, the explosion is cancelled and Scott's copies begin to fall into the abyss. With her husband about to be trapped in the storm of probabilities, Wasp arrives to save him and together they set off countless explosives, finally succeeding in making the core return to normal size and putting an end to all the instability. Back to their original size, Hope and Janet do everything they can to convince Scott not to hand over the Matrix, but Kang shows up just in time and retrieves the object with telekinesis, refusing to return Cassie as agreed. While Henry fights MODOK on the ship, Scott and Hope go after the Conqueror wanting Cassie back and are easily defeated, leaving only Janet to go and save her husband, but when she tries to run, Kang paralyzes his former companion's body and teleports her to the center of the citadel, leaving the grandmother and granddaughter as his prisoners. Taking advantage of the fact that the Conqueror is distracted by Janet, Cassie shrinks the guards who are transporting her and kicks them away, then becomes small and runs off through the corridors without anyone noticing. While the girl is trying to escape, Henry finds Scott and Hope accompanied by their aunts and explains that they have somehow managed to survive the fall into the quantum realm and have undergone time dilation, living thousands of years in a short space of time, which has allowed them to evolve their technology in an absurd way. Back in the Citadel, Cassie goes to the cell where Jentora is and knocks out the nearby guards to free her, offering to join forces with her and ask for the others' help to put an end to the villain. Unaware that a rebellion is about to begin, Kang sends a message to his soldiers calling on everyone to destroy the quantum realm and leave for other universes, but his transmission is interrupted by Cassie, who breaks into the tower and transmits a hologram asking for the help of everyone who can still fight. Furious at her attitude, Kang orders MODOK to finish off the girl and puts the core back in the ship, preparing to leave as soon as he has completed his goal of destroying the quantum realm. Wanting to gather as many allies as possible, Cassie helps Jentora free the other prisoners when Darren shows up to confront them, but the girl isn't willing to give up and orders them to continue releasing people while she deals with MODOK. Outside the Citadel, Henry hears the hologram of his granddaughter and speeds off to get there, leaving Scott at the entrance to the place to challenge Kang. At his full size, the Ant-Man starts destroying all the Empire's buildings and attracts everyone's attention to himself, allowing Cassie to escape from the MODOK and Jentora to finish freeing the prisoners. Just as Scott is about to succumb, reinforcements finally arrive on the battlefield and the Quantum people begin to destroy Kang's army, helping Jentora to unite the two groups of rebels and start the revolution. Realizing that things are getting out of hand, Kang decides to flee and begins the launch sequence, but Scott refuses to allow this to happen and rips off the top of a building to use as a shield, reflecting the artillery attacks and allowing him to reach the force barrier. Seeing her father struggling to stop Kang from leaving, Cassie tries to run to help him when she ends up being attacked by the MODOK, making it impossible for her to reach Scott, who ends up being knocked out by the tower's rings. Trapped against the egghead, Cassie changes the capsule of her suit and manages to become almost as giant as her father, allowing her to knock MODOK out with a single punch. While his daughter tries to convince Darren to stop being a prisoner, Scott gets up and, with Hope's help, throws himself against the force field, destroying the tower's rings and unleashing the energy core of the place. Jentora then advances with her army towards the ship, but inside, Kang has not yet given up and finally decides to start fighting, putting on his full suit and flying towards the revolutionaries, exterminating them one by one with his cosmic blasts. To protect her men, Jentora throws his spear at Kang, who manages to defend himself with telekinesis. Supporting the woman, one of the hammerheads fires a blast of energy at the Conqueror, who hits back, exploding the creature's skull and ending the rebels' hopes of victory. Realizing that they won't stand a chance, Quaz grabs Jentora and flees with the rest of the army, while the Ant-Man and his family advance to the great final battle. Together, the Wasp and the Ant-Man shrink and begin a succession of attacks on Kang, who repels them with bursts of energy. Wanting to help her parents, Cassie becomes a giant and grabs the villain to crush him with her bare hands, but Kang manages to cause an explosion of power that knocks her away. As the girl falls, Wasp starts firing at the villain's face, who seems to have suffered no damage, but hits back with a slap. Furious, Scott advances towards Kang and becomes a giant to slam him into a building, but the man is overpowered and doesn't seem to take any damage, hitting him with a blast that sends the Ant-Man flying away and back to his original size. Thinking that victory is already his, Kang says that he has already eliminated all the Avengers in other realities and mocks Scott by saying that his only power is to talk to insects, but at that very moment, Henry arrives with his army of ants who annihilate the Conqueror's troops, forcing the villain to create a force field around him to defend himself. While his citadel is destroyed by the ants, Kang does everything he can to maintain the barrier until MODOK appears and decides to change sides, using his powers to break the force field and leave his former leader exposed to the insects that begin to devour him while he is still alive. With the battle over, Scott and the others gather around Darren, who finally makes peace with Ant-Man, losing his life just seconds after apologizing. While this is going on, Janet finds the energy core on the ground and communicates with the rest of the family, saying that they have little time to get home. After leaving the quantum realm in the hands of Jentora and Quaz, Janet turns on the machine and opens a portal so that her family can return to the laboratory on Earth, allowing them to go home, but just as they are about to cross, Scott hears a strange noise and pushes Cassie into the portal, falling behind and being hit by an attack from Kang, who hasn't given up yet. Even with his suit completely destroyed, The villain wants to return to Earth and runs towards the passageway, only to be stopped by Scott, who starts a fight. Knowing that he won't be able to escape as long as the Ant-Man is alive, Kang charges at him and hits Scott in the chest, knocking him to the ground and leaving him exposed to kicks that smash his helmet. Even though he's badly injured, the Conqueror is much stronger and manages to land several blows that leave the Ant-Man almost lifeless. With his rival practically defeated, Kang begins to force his head in an attempt to crush him against the energy core, but even so, Scott doesn't give up and takes the opportunity to throw several explosives into the Matrix. With the portal about to close, Kang tries to jump through to the other side, only to be stopped by the Wasp, who arrives to save her husband, pushing the villain against the core, which begins to collapse and absorbs Kang's body, exploding immediately afterwards. With the battle over, Ant-Man and the Wasp are trapped in the quantum realm, which can finally return to peace, but Cassie refuses to leave her parents behind and manages to reopen the portal to Earth, allowing Scott to return to San Francisco and live out his life as a former Avenger. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you like the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.